And last but not at all least is Adolph Reed Jr. Adolph is professor of political science at the University of Pennsylvania. His work specializes on race, class, and U.S. politics. He's edited and authored several books, including Renewing Black Intellectual History, The Ideological and Material Foundations of African American Thought, and a book that I think has an outstanding title, Class Notes, Posing as Politics and Other Thoughts on the American Scene. Adolph was also a key leader in the effort to establish an American Labor Party in 1996, and he'll be taking time to share that perspective. Please help me to welcome Adolph.
Hi, I'm very pleased and honored to be here, and I was just thinking as I was listening that we should probably have gone in a different order, because I'm going to talk about the United States, so I'm going to be Captain Bring Down. But we aren't going to end on an upbeat note, I guess. I did actually. We had a session on what we're now calling the Labor Party experiment in the U.S. We had a session on that yesterday afternoon. I know a number of people were there, so you can nap for the next 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm probably going to go over a lot of what I said then. I'll just say a little bit about it and talk some about context. I was thinking on the way over, I think I can't remember if it was Leo or Sam who asked yesterday if we had set out to develop toward a socialist party model or a social democratic party model. And I was kind of hung up, because the fact of the matter is, because the United States is the United States and the left in the United States is the left in the United States, that decision was pretty far down the road for us, right? And it's a question that came up often enough. I mean, both for tendentious reasons and for reasonable ones. Is this a socialist party? Is this a left party? And what we always said from beginning to end, and in a minute I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give an overview of the trajectory of the experiment, was that we were trying to build a party of the working class, right? And if there was a flim-flam that was involved there, look, a lot of us were Marxists, a lot of us were non-Marxist socialists, a lot of people were just sort of broad working class leftists. The center of gravity of the party's program and our organizing model was building a working class based mass political movement anchored in the trade unions. And part of the sotto voce aspect of the program, or the approach, was to cultivate a particular kind of working class consciousness, right? Like we understand, a working class isn't given. There's no given the working class consciousness out there, and what our project was, maybe you put it a tad oversimplified, was to build out from the trade union sector around a program and an approach to politics that would, and I'll try to stay away from our old slogans, but an approach to politics that defined substantively and institutionally, that defined the working class as broadly as we think it makes sense to define it, which includes not just people who belong to unions, but people in Michael Zweig's characterization either work for a living or are expected to work for a living, whether they do or don't, and to articulate a program that reflected what the country would look like, what public policy in the U.S. would look like if the country were governed by and in the interest of the working class. Okay. The project grew out of the trade union movement, of course. It originated mainly in the old oil, chemical, and atomic workers the union, which Sarah Palin's husband actually was a member of. And he was a member of a local, actually, that had 200 members on dues check to the Labor Party, right? So they were paying monthly dues to us. So that's just something about the contradictions. And from what I understand from the president of the local, Todd Palin was a decent trade unionist, right, until he made enough money to go do something else, which is also a not unfamiliar story, especially in the oil sector. But and for between roughly 1990 and 1996, Tony Mazzocchi, who was a longtime official in Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers, was subsidized by the union to go around the country on what used to be called the QT, I think now it's the DL, to sound out other trade unionists and unions institutionally to see what kind of support there was out there for creating like an independent political party of labor based in the trade union movement. By the time we founded it, we had our founding convention in 1996 with affiliations from 9 national unions, and this wasn't just a paper endorsement. Like the affiliation fee was $10,000 a year. 250 to 350 locals, joint councils, districts, that represented a total of 2.5 million workers, right? So, we had 1,500 delegates at the founding convention, and we organized around a program that we hammered out at that convention and an electoral strategy that I'll talk about in a second. As I mentioned yesterday, this was like slow, steady going work, but the pace really picked up around 1994. And by pace, I mean expressions of broad interest from the trade union movement picked up around the mid-90s. 2 important factors that were themselves linked. One was the Clinton administration and its support for NAFTA, which just sent shockwaves, especially through the industrial sector. And one thing that was very nice to see about it, actually, was that even unions like the steel workers, Sam's Auto Workers, the jingoism that had occasionally, or so commonly been a reflex, wasn't present. And in fact, the leadership of those unions took pains, it seemed to me, even the UAW, to counter, right, the jingoistic and racist imperial narratives. The other, linked event was the sea change, or the apparent sea change within the AFL-CIO itself. Lane Kirkland, the longtime president who had succeeded George Meany as president of the Fed, was ousted, or his handpicked successor was ousted by a new alliance. It was called they call itself the New Voice ticket. That was headed by John Sweeney, who came out of the Service Employees International Union, and Trumka, from the mine workers, and Linda Chavez Thompson from the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees in the new office. So anyway, there was a sense abroad, right, in the land, that there was some space that was opening up in the trade union movement, and that's what kind of pressed us to hold a founding condition. I think I mentioned yesterday that we were a little anxious about being premature with this, but it was also the case, and this is an important part of the story with the American left, that our own base was becoming impatient, because we've been doing this now. We've been in the mode, the entity that was set up to do the preliminary organizing, we called Labor Party advocates. Our job was to advocate for a Labor Party. And there was a feeling that 5 years of this was enough. Right? You trade your car every 3 years, so you have to have a new party. So anyway, so we did it, and one of the central debates about which way, well, a couple of points. We never really understood this as being, as I said, as being a left party, or even a party that was principally concerned with organizing the left. And I think that largely has to do with the character of the left in the U.S., but also like the center of anti-leftist center of gravity in dominant American liberalism. Right? We've never had even as everyone knows, American politics hasn't really had even a sellout party of the quality of the NDP. Right? And the Democratic Party had been an inhospitable home for labor and for working class interests. Some would say all along, but certainly since Jimmy Carter. And there was no basis for like an institutionalized or an organized left that had any social traction outside the labor movement, ultimately. And this was another tension that we had to navigate, right? But the main issue was the electoral politics question, right? The dominant view of the leadership of the Labor Party, okay, cool, was that we needed to build an institutional base, right? To build a political base in states and cities before engaging in electoral action. The two contending schools of thought were one view is that you build a movement through running electoral candidacies. The view that was the dominant one in the Labor Party was that what was that? The electoral domain is more one for consolidating and expressing power that's been won outside electoral politics than it is a domain for building power. And from our perspective, I think the difference that accounted for that difference was connected with our understanding that we needed to create a constituency for a transformative working class politics. And if the constituency is not there, then jumping prematurely into the electoral realm backfires, right? You can't get your message across. The kinds of contact that you make with people are different, like an electoral campaign. And frankly, our model of organizing was much more like a union organizing model, right? And I can talk about this some in Q&A if you want, but we tried to organize around broad national issue-based campaigns, stuff like campaign for single-payer health care, free public education, free public higher education, and the labor law reform. And the idea was that each of these campaigns was not only a campaign for an objective that spoke to the real concerns of working people, but also was an objective that raised the question of what the responsibilities of the government should be to the citizenry, right? And what the scope of expectation, what the scope of expectation is that it's reasonable to have of the federal government. And I want to stress that because one of the problems in the U.S. that people don't like to face up to, right, and the leftists kind of live on not facing up to, is the extent to which neoliberal consciousness has won, and has won the struggle for hearts and minds of the American people. And our sense was that we had to try to counter that, and that's not an overnight project either. And I'll wrap up by saying this. Obviously, since we've all been talking about the Labor Party in the past, it no longer exists, and we pulled the plug on it finally. And I think the short message to take from it is that a project like that is dependent on the existence of a vibrant trade union movement. And as the labor movement went into steeper the decline, we lost affiliates, but no one really ever disaffiliated. We lost affiliates through mergers and through locals going out of business, right? And that's kind of where, well, I think that's where we are in the left now, and I will conclude, finally, by saying that this is part of the answer to the question that I and others have been asking about the hysteria about Barack Obama in 2008, who was clearly never more than an ordinary neoliberal Democrat. The question of why did so many people who should have known better, right, not people who are naive about politics or don't follow it closely, get so swept up in the hype about Obama. And I think I think the short answer to that question is it's a testament to the triumph of neoliberal ideology, even within the horizons of what understands itself to be an activist left in American politics. Thank you.